Okay, so hopefully we're fairly solid on the tools at this point, and now we can sort of take them out and play with them in real life situations. So let's consider the following. Oh, guess it's about time for me to throw that one out. Let's consider the following. Let's look at the market for toilet paper in Billings, just because we can. We may know something about that. Of course, you can change the context if you want and say, what did the coronavirus do in that situation? Well, I think as most of us saw, what happened was we saw an increase in demand. People, for some reason, I do not understand the American obsession with toilet paper, but regardless, people saw an increase in their expected benefit of owning large volumes of toilet paper. In which case, if nothing else interfered, we would expect there to be an increase in the price, and that increase in price would communicate to some suppliers to bring more to market, and it would encourage some of those consumers who otherwise would have recklessly grabbed a bunch of toilet paper when they really didn't value it as much as other people. They would have cut back. They would have found substitutes. Now, some people would find this very troubling, right? We certainly found this troubling about the increase in the price of hand sanitizer, and eventually we had Amazon put in place these sort of gouging policies, anti-gouging policies, and it turns out many states have what are called anti-gouging policies. In other words, they say, look, if as a result of a natural disaster, you can't increase your price. Now, sometimes they'll say you can't increase your price by more than 10% or certain specified volumes here, and there's kind of the question, what qualifies as a national emergency? Or was it declared an emergency? Under what conditions does the anti-gouging law apply? But for our purposes here, let's assume that that's actually what happens, is that we have an anti-gouging policy in place. I'm just going to move this over so I have enough room to subsequently do our analysis. And again, a quick story to let me know what you're thinking. You're saying, well, I mean, maybe you're, I'm pretty sure this is going to happen, right? So we say, look, you can't increase your price. It's illegal. We're going to put you in jail. And we're assuming, by the way, that this law is going to be well enforced, which is not an entirely unreasonable assumption, although we would have to look and say, is this just something that we say, or is this the actual policy? Well, if you can't increase the price, what happens next? Well, in this case, suppliers are going to be unwilling, and we're also going to assume everybody follows the law. Now, we could relax that assumption later, but we're going to assume everybody follows the law, in which case we would have this increase in demand is still going to be there because the situation has changed. And now, will suppliers supply any more quantity than this? No, they are neither being provided with the information, although the empty-ish shelves might give them some information, but they're certainly not being provided with the incentive to bring more to market. And so they're only going to produce that much. Now, at that lower price, consumers want this quantity out here. And normally when we let price fluctuate, we get some adjustment out of the suppliers and some adjustment out of the consumers. Consumers and suppliers cooperate with both each other, well, with both, right? Consumers and producers cooperate, but in this situation, particularly as consumers cut back, they're cooperating with other consumers. They're saying, you know what? I will leave that on the shelf for somebody else. Now, that's not what they think. Most people walk into the store and they say, this is outrageous. But they behave as though that's what they were doing. In many ways, they are very, right? This is the whole issue with social coordination. They don't know the people they're coordinating with or cooperating with. They're probably even upset about this. They said, this is outrageous, these prices. But they do coordinate and cooperate with the other customers. Now, normally we'd get an adjustment from both of them, but now we are going to get no adjustment from the producers, assuming they follow the law. So in order for us to be stable, anytime, right, in order to be stable, quantity supplied has to equal quantity demanded. Well, if this is the quantity supplied, then we're going to have to find some way for consumers to only consume that quantity there. What would cause consumers to only consume this quantity here? It's a hard question, or is it? We have some tools. Let's just pull these back apart, and we have demand. What would cause, we have cost here. What would cause consumers to consume that quantity there? Well, we know the answer. We know the answer is, we go up to our schedule and we go across. When this is the cost that consumers bear, they will only consume this quantity here. So what would cause consumers to consume this quantity here? Well, you can squint so you don't even see this demand schedule, because we're not actually on that schedule anymore. I just erased that to clean this up a little bit. So what would cause consumers to consume? We have to go up to our new demand schedule and go over. When this is the cost to consumers and this is the benefit to the producers, we're going to be stable right here. Of course, now we have to ask the question of what would cause us to be stable right there. Or in other words, what would cause consumers to give up more than producers receive? Now, I clearly didn't plan ahead well enough here. Well, maybe I did. So what would cause this to be, right? We know this has to happen for us to be stable. And so how would it be possible for consumers to give up more than producers receive? So we took the information, we matched it onto supply, demand, neither or both. We looked at the impact on price and quantity without the policy, and now we've looked at the impact on price and quantity with the policy. Of course, the last stage is then going to be to assess the impact of that policy and see if it's good for society or bad for society, good for consumers, bad for consumers, and so forth. But before we get there, we want to figure out how is it possible for consumers to give up more than producers receive? It's a tough question because it's a weird thing to think about. But I have part of a dollar bill left over from a previous exercise in this. Basically, one way in which that would work is if we made every customer that came in tear up some dollar bills, light them on fire, right? You'd probably have to light them on fire because this you could actually tape together, and with a little bit of time and energy, you could you can take it to a bank and they'll give you $1, right? So we'd need them to destroy the dollar bills. So say that the cost to consumers that would cause them to consume this quantity here, maybe for a roll of toilet paper, was $15, and this here was $5. Then what would we need to do? I'm not going to do this, but we could make them tear up a $10 bill. In which case, consumers would give up 15, producers would receive 5, and we would be stable. Now, in the real world, it turns out we don't make people tear up $10 bills. If any of you take macroeconomics or have taken macroeconomics, you'll understand that actually it turns out making them tear up $10 bills would be better for society because it will actually increase the value of the rest of the currency units in circulation. And so it's not entirely lost to society, but we don't do that. Most of the time, we make consumers destroy value competing for scarce quantity. Oftentimes, it might be waiting in line. It might be having to dress more nicely. It might be having to make friends with the shopkeepers who or the toilet paper distributors, or taking their child out on a date and trying to cultivate a relationship with them that way. Basically, there's a whole bunch of ways in which this could happen. So the way I think about it, though, is you have to destroy the dollar bills. Okay. So now the question would be, what is the impact of this on well-being? So let's see if we can do this. I think we should. We have our tools. And by the way, this is really where our tools come into their own. We don't have control over whether, there's some impact we could have on the extent of the coronavirus outbreak, but we don't have control over the weather. We don't have control over diseases and epidemics directly. And so what we can control, however, is our response to the world. Really, what do we have control over? We have control over whether we put this policy in place. Now, arguably, the idea of this policy is to help the consumers, right? That's the idea. Is that we don't want, or alternately, the other way to put this might be, some people would say, well, what we really want to do is punish the producers. We don't want these evil, avaricious producers to get benefit. So we could either, right, hurt or keep producers from profiting, keep suppliers from profiting. We'll abbreviate profit as pi. Again, these are at least the ostensible reasons why we have these policies. So let's figure out whether this policy achieves the goal or not. So we could look at a few things. Just for practice, we could look at no policy and no corona. Right? In which case, consumer surplus before anything here. Consumer surplus. Oh, I need some letters. And again, these can go in anywhere. They're just placeholders. So, consumer surplus before the change. Consumers were on this demand schedule, and we're at this quantity, right? So consumers are getting benefit, benefit, benefit. Consumers are getting N, L, G, F, and A. Consumers are having to hand over this much per roll of toilet paper or pack of, it's not $5, I don't think, I don't know. I don't buy toilet paper, so I don't know. But, so, that's their cost, F and A. They're left with N, L, and G. Producers, on the other hand, are getting what consumers are handing over in this case. That's not always the case. They're getting revenue, 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 or benefit, 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 F and A. They're giving up A. We know that because we know that supply is a marginal cost schedule. And their net benefit is F. Government is neither making nor spending money in this market, so that's zero, but we don't want to forget to put that up there because eventually we may look at some situations where government isn't zero. Total surplus then is NLGF. Okay, so that's just a baseline. Next situation. We have corona and no policy. And this will look very similar to what we've already seen. But again, we'll go ahead and work through it. I'll actually leave the numbers off here because again, this will anchor it in your brain. Consumer surplus, when we have coronavirus in the policy, we're on this demand schedule at this quantity and this price. So consumers are getting benefit, 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 benefit. You know this because a demand schedule tells us marginal benefit. So they're getting all of this. They're getting N, M, L, K, J, G, H, I, F, A, E, and B. And what are they giving up? Well, they're giving up the price. They're giving up price and price and price. And so they're losing G, H, I, F, A, B, and E. G, H, I, F, A, B, and E. And again, many of you are going to try and do this in your head. I don't encourage that. Then you have to actually hold it in your head as opposed to outsourcing it. This requires a little bit of ink and a little bit of muscle ache, but it doesn't require any heavy lifting mentally. And so what we're left with as consumer surplus is N, M, L, K, and J. Producer surplus. Well, producers now receive this much for that many units, so they're getting benefit, benefit, benefit. G, H, I, F, A, B, and E. Their total cost, of course, and supply is a marginal cost schedule. Cost, 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 cost. A, B, and E. And so they're left with G, H, I, and F. Government, 0. Total surplus, we just add these up. N, M, L, K, J, G, H, I, and F. All right. How about now we can look at Corona and the policy. Oops. In that instance, consumer surplus, well, we're at this quantity on this demand schedule, so we know that they're getting the benefit of that unit and benefit and benefit and benefit. So their total benefit is N, M, L, K, G, H, F, and A. And now what's their total cost? Well, since they're consuming this quantity, we know this has to be their cost. They're giving up this much in money to the merchants, and sadly, we don't make them tear up this in money. We actually make them wait in line or destroy value in some other fashion. And so we would have cost, cost, and cost. L, K, G, H, F, and A. L, K, G, H,